Hello everyone, this is Dr. Vlad Krotov. Welcome to our video lecture on project integration management. In this video lecture, we will adopt a very high-level sort of bird view perspective on the phases, meaning typical stages or steps that projects and project managers typically go through. And also adopting this high-level perspective on the phases of projects will also help you to get, again, a high-level understanding on what it takes to integrate and coordinate all those phases and components of a project together. So this is what this video lecture is largely about. Now, specifically, after completing this video lesson, you should be able to explain what project lifecycle is, also discuss the main phases of project management lifecycle or project lifecycle. You should also be able to explain what project integration is all about, and also discuss the main project integration processes that project managers use to coordinate and glue together everything, all the major components and steps in relation to a project. So those are the main learning outcomes. So let's start with the main framework of this lesson, and I would say it's probably one of the main or one of the most important frameworks for the entire course. And this framework that you see here represents the so-called project management lifecycle. So what is a project management lifecycle? Project management lifecycle is a combination of the most important phases that all projects and project managers have to go through in order to deliver the product or service that the project was envisioned to deliver. Okay, so of course there are different projects out there, there are different organizations, and sometimes not all of those phases are followed. For example, some organizations, they skip the so-called closing phase, and they skip it because they feel like they don't have time or resources to compile a lessons learned report to formally close the project. Once they are done with the execution, they take their project team members and they transfer them to another team or another project so that time and resources are saved. So it's not carved in stone, but I would say typically projects go through the following phases, or should go through the following phases. Number one, initiation. So this is the phase where a project is conceived. By that we mean that a project is described from a very high level perspective. In other words, there's like a conceptual description of what the project is and what it's supposed to deliver. And this conceptual understanding of the project is usually captured with a document called project charter. So project charter formulates the main vision for the project, the main business goals, the main approach to the project. Sometimes a business case is also included as a part of the initiation phase, which means an exploration of how feasible and valuable the project is from a business standpoint. This is also the phase where the main stakeholders for the project are identified, meaning who are the main project team members, who are the main people within the organization who are impacted by this project, who are the main sponsors or supporters of the project, and so forth. So the initiation phase gives like a formal birth or formal beginning of a project. So once the initiation phase is over, project managers typically enter the planning phase. So this is the phase where a detailed project management plan is created, which means that all little aspects of the project are thought through. So once planning is over, project managers go to the execution phase. In other words, whatever was planned during the planning phase is being implemented. Now, execution is probably the most important and the most resource-heavy phase, right? This is where most of the time and most of the resources are expended. Of course, the execution phase depends heavily on the planning phase. There's a saying that goes something like that. You know, if I had 7 days to cut a tree, I would spend 6 days sharpening my axe. So the planning phase is that sharpening of axe phase where details of the execution are fleshed out. So after the execution phase, which means the entire project is executed and the promised product or service is delivered or not delivered, in the case of a failed project, project management teams enter the so-called closing phase. So this is the phase where the project is formally closed. Certain assets are created like manuals, policy updates. A lessons learned report is a very important artifact of the closing phase, where project managers and their team members reflect on the things that went well or did not go so well, so that other project managers or other project teams can learn from their best practices or mistakes. So this is the closing phase. And then there's another phase. Sometimes some authors, they put monitoring and control like somewhere towards the end. But to me, monitoring and control is the phase that spans all other phases of the project lifecycle, which means you monitor, as a project manager, you monitor and control things and processes and people throughout the entire duration of the project. Now, what do we mean by monitoring and control? This is how I understand those terms. By monitoring, I mean like passive observation of how things are, and whether processes and people meet the deadlines or standards specified in the project plan. So monitoring means like passive observation, comparing what you see to what things are supposed to be as outlined in your plan. And then control is a more active interference. So if you monitor execution, let's say, and you see that certain things are not working out well, let's say you keep missing the deadlines, then you intervene, right? And you try to understand why. First of all, you're trying to understand why you're missing those deadlines, and you're trying to eliminate those factors that lead to the project team missing deadlines. So control monitoring means passive observation. Control means active interference to eliminate issues and to make sure that the project is progressing smoothly. So for example, you can see that through intervention that maybe your planning is not very realistic and you need to do some adjustments to make sure the deadlines are not missed. So monitoring and control, to me, it's a phase of the project lifecycle that spans all other phases. Now, I already mentioned that project management lifecycle is a very important framework. A lot of that this framework influences a lot of other artifacts. Like, for example, your project management plan is largely influenced by those typical phases in project lifecycle. Your work breakdown structure should contain items related to all 5 phases of project management lifecycle. For example, a lot of times when people submit their work breakdown structure, I see that they're missing the monitoring and control phase. For some reason, they plan for the project without planning for monitoring and controlling of the project throughout the entire duration of the project. Or sometimes I see some work breakdown structures are missing items related to the closing phase, such as lessons learned report. So this is what project management lifecycle is. Again, it's a combination of the most important phases that most projects go through. So now what we're going to do, we're going to zoom in on each of those phases and just discuss it in a little bit more detail. So let's start with the project initiation phase. This phase involves defining the project at a very high level, determining its feasibility, let's say technical feasibility, whether it's possible from a technical standpoint, or economic feasibility, whether this project is worthwhile as a worthwhile investment, whether it's worthwhile from a financial standpoint, and also identifying the main goals and objectives of the project. What are we trying to achieve at the high level? So some of the key activities in that phase involves creating a project charter. It's a document that formally recognizes and authorizes a project by combining information about all these items discussed previously, plus also the team comprising the project, the project team members, as well as the main sponsors within the organization. Sometimes business case is created, which is a document that justifies the project from a business standpoint. And also stakeholder identification. Again, this can be done as a part of the project charter creation. So what happens during that phase, all the important stakeholders are identified so you can start working with them as a team, as a project manager. So that's the initiation phase. The planning phase focuses on detailed planning, including setting the project scope, which means what needs to be done, creating a detailed work breakdown structure, which is like a very detailed to-do list in relation to the project, determining budgets, timelines, and resource requirements and allocations for the project. So some of the key activities for the planning phase is creating a project plan, and this is, by the way, your main assignment, main deliverable for this course, to create a project management plan. The project management plan can be comprised of various subplans or sections such as risk management plan, procurement plan, schedules, budgets, quality plan, communication plan, and so forth. So the key activity here is to produce a detailed project management plan that is reviewed and approved by all the important stakeholders. Execution. So the execution phase involves implementing the project's plan, ensuring deliverables are being completed on time and within budget, and also managing teams and resources as you implement your project plan. So some of the key activities during execution is task assignment, meaning assigning items from the work breakdown structure to individual team members, performing quality assurance, communication, tracking progress, and so forth. So I already mentioned that this is probably the most important, the most resource-heavy phase. This is where things actually get done, right? And getting things done within an organization is probably more difficult than planning, than initiating, right? Because that's where real work happens. And then you have the so-called closure phase. So the closure phase or closing phase involves completing the project, delivering the final product or service, formally transitioning the ownership of the product or service to your client, releasing resources, for example, formally releasing project team members from their work on the team, and also obtaining stakeholder approval. So those are some key activities, those are some of the main things that are happening within the closing phase. So again, some key activities that overlap here is that you have a final deliverable handover. Let's say CRM system is formally transferred to the marketing department. Project documentation, for example, a lessons learned report that does post-project evaluation to see which things went well, which things did not go well, and many other activities like, for example, creating manuals, creating policies, training end users, and so forth. So this is, sometimes training is included as a part of the execution phase. So those are those final closing activities. And I already mentioned that some organizations, they skip the closing phase because they feel that they need to release resources as soon as possible and put all of those resources to the next project. But some people would say that, some experts would say that skipping the closing phase may actually backfire in the long run, because if you don't learn from your mistakes, if you don't do any kind of post-project performance evaluation, then you're not likely to learn much from your past mistakes or best practices, and this can jeopardize the chances of future project success. Actually, in my experience, without giving you too many details, I worked on a project for a year or two. It was more like a side project, not my main focus. And the project failed. I mean, things did not work out as I was hoping to. And then I remember talking about this to one of my colleagues, and she has been at the organization for many years, and she told me, 6 years ago we tried to do the same thing or similar thing, and it didn't work out for the same reason. And that's when I thought, well, I wish I had some kind of lessons learned report repository so that I can check other projects, what they did and what they struggled with, to make sure I don't reinvent the wheel and I don't fail in the same way. But to my great surprise, I discovered that my project failed in the same way as the project that was initiated 6 years ago. So that's like an example of a downside of skipping the closing phase and not maintaining proper project documentation and post-project evaluation. Okay, monitoring and controlling. So this phase runs concurrently with execution. That's what some people say. But I would say that it runs concurrently not only with execution, but all other phases of the project. I mean, if you want to be a diligent project manager, you need to monitor and control all phases, not just execution. But again, a lot of people put it next to the execution phase or even somewhere at the end of the life cycle. But I think that's not a good idea. I mean, it has to be something that is spanning all other phases. So monitoring and controlling involves tracking project performance. So that's the monitoring part, where you just look at the performance compared to targets. Managing changes, right? That's the controlling part. If things are not working well, that may require an active intervention from the side of the project manager. So overall, monitoring and controlling phase ensures that the project stays on track, meaning within timeline and within budget. So some of the key activities that happen during the monitoring controlling phase, comparing results with performance metrics, let's say as outlined in the project management plan, doing risk management, anticipating the things that can go wrong and trying to interfere and prevent those risks from materializing. Change control management, which means if something is not working well, you may need to change something in relation to your project. Let's say you will change some of the requirements in relation to the software that you're trying to deliver. But that's not as simple as just saying, oh, we're going to change the requirements. It requires an integrated change control management where, first of all, those changes are evaluated by a formal committee. And then once those changes are approved, they're cascaded throughout the entire project documentation and eventually make it to the execution phase. And then reporting, updating the project sponsors, the senior management, the most important stakeholders of the project as to the progress and performance of your entire project and your project team. So this is the monitoring and controlling phase. Now, what is project integration? Project integration management is a key aspect of project management. It ensures that various project elements and phases are effectively coordinated. I would say that project integration management is the main task of a project manager. So your job as a project manager is to coordinate, is to synchronize, is to communicate, to make sure that everybody and everything is on the same page and working towards a common goal that this project is trying to deliver. Project integration often involves making trade-offs among competing objectives. So you cannot be everything to everyone, and if things are not going well, the only thing a project manager usually can realistically do is to change, meaning trim down the objectives, not trying to do too many things at once. Okay, so yeah, sometimes integration requires trade-offs. You need to say that, well, certain aspects are not working well, so we need to remove those aspects from the project and concentrate on what's really important. It also involves managing stakeholder expectations so that they know what's happening in different areas, because let's say a project sponsor may have an unrealistic expectation of the project deliverables because he or she is not aware of what's actually happening at the execution phase. So integration means coordinating those things, making sure that the project team's information, including negative information, is properly delivered to all the stakeholders. So I would say that it's one of the primary, if not the main responsibility of a project manager to integrate and coordinate everything in relation to a project. So what are some of the typical project integration processes, meaning the things that project managers do to integrate, to coordinate, to pull all the project components together? Number one, developing project charter. That happens at the initiation phase. This is where everybody comes together to decide what the project is, what are the main goals of the project, how we're going to approach this project, and who are the main stakeholders. Then developing project management plan can be viewed as an extension or expansion of the project charter. So project charter gives a description of the project from a very high level, while the project management plan goes into details of the project. So again, this is where everybody comes together to do planning, and it's not just about people coming together. You also pull together the resources, timelines, expectations, requirements to create a coherent project management plan that also outlines that common vision in detail in relation to the project. Also, a lot of integration and coordination happens when a project manager directs and manages work, right? So managing people usually means communicating with them and coordinating their efforts. Another integration process is managing project knowledge, let's say by creating some kind of project knowledge management repository where findings and reports and minutes of the meetings are pulled together so that knowledge is distributed across the entire project team and not limited to one phase or one group of people. Monitoring and controlling, again, another integration process. You want to make sure that everything is working smoothly as planned, as outlined in the project management plan. Performing integrated change control is another important integration process. Again, if a change is requested, let's say by software developers, you need to make sure that this change is approved, properly understood, and implemented by everybody, and that change is properly cascaded or implemented within the product that you're trying to deliver. And also closing projects. So this is kind of pulling everybody's knowledge, everybody's opinion, and everybody's impressions towards the end of the project, where everybody comes in and reflects on what went well or what did not go well. So closing the project provides another important platform for integrating everybody's effort and understanding, not necessarily in relation to this specific project because the project is already over, but that integration, that coordination will help in future projects that the project team or the organization will be involved in. So that completes our video lecture on project integration management. I recommend that you pause here and see if you can answer all these review questions on the review questions slide. If you can answer all those questions in your own words, that's great. If you cannot answer those questions, then you probably need to go back to chapter notes or maybe watch this video lecture again to make sure you have a good understanding of all the main concepts covered by this video lecture. So that's it. Thank you for listening.
The struggle is real. I'm spinning these wheels.